Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ruby AI podcast. I am Valentino Stoll, joined by my lovely co-host, Joe.
Hi, I'm the lovely co-host. I've got something to hit you with right off the bat, Valentino. Sora is no more. OpenAI announced today that, let me get this right from CNN, is winding down Sora, the video generation app. It launched to so much fanfare last year. And I have a question for you. What are you going to do? The deal with Disney that was announced in December is now dead. You can no longer automate your favorite Disney characters. What are you going to do with your time?
Find another model.
Find another model. Yeah.
I do think it's funny that they couldn't afford video.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I read it and I thought kind of like, okay, good. And my second thought was, actually, it's really hard to do some of this stuff. And if you're trying to focus on everything, it's a little bit of a response to people who are just like, oh, well, in 2 years, AI will just do X, where X is anything, movie production, full accounting system, like whatever it is. And it's not because AI can't do it or it's incapable. It's because a business has to be built around this and it's hard. And we didn't get here with 3 years worth of effort. And you're not going to just kind of take it over with one company or three companies doing every industry that we can comprehend right now. So there's my rant, and thank you for indulging me. And now let's introduce our guest today, the wildly competent engineer and community organizer, Bekki Freeman. We are so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
We're excited too. I'm excited. First, I'm going off script here. Not that we really have a script, but I'm kind of curious about your work with Rocky Mountain Ruby and how it's going and what's going to look like this year.
We have dates for this fall.
All right.
So excited. And now you're catching me off guard because I don't have a calendar up in order to tell you the exact date. So it's going to be the end of September, and it's going to be in the beautiful Boulder, Colorado, as always. Same venue, eTown, which we all love. And our dates are September 28th and 29th. Would love to see you all. We're going to be opening our request for proposals in the next couple months, and we'll start getting our lineup set, and then tickets will go on sale as soon as we have our schedule.
I'm going to fire off a proposal. I'll tell you what, because I missed the window for RubyConf because of laziness. And I would like to remedy that with Rocky Mountain devs.
We would love to have your proposal. That sounds great. I will make sure you get the message when we go live.
That's great.
Yeah. So Spike and I've been doing Rocky Mountain Ruby for a few years now, and we just love it. It is such a welcoming and kind atmosphere. And we build in a lot of social time, which some people go, oh, but the truth is, in reality, people love it. We have icebreakers. We make sure that everybody is very friendly to inviting a new stranger into their group to get to know. We have open lunch so that everyone can go and talk. And it's just a fun conference. And Boulder in the fall is gorgeous as well. So a lot of people will come early for the weekend and go hiking and then come and see us for the conference.
Yeah, I love that. I do love the getting to know you stuff. I do groan at it when it's announced, and then I do it and I always enjoy it. Ancient City Ruby, I don't think they have it anymore, but that used to be along the similar lines in Jacksonville Beach, where, yeah, you spent about 60% of the time in conference sessions, and then, you really went out and got to know everybody the rest of it. So I'm very excited about that. And I love flagship is the right word, but the premier regional conferences, of which this is definitely one. And I really love that you're still doing that work.
We love it. Yep. I'm repping my Rocky Mountain Ruby Stella dinosaur right now.
Yeah.
Yes. So if you want to see this year's Stella, you have to come to the conference.
All right. So I reached out to you so that we could talk a little bit about AI and Ruby. And I thought you're at relatively new. You're about a year in to your new role. And I thought, well, I bet there's some interesting stuff going on. And when we had just a brief chat, I thought, yeah, this is good. We haven't done a show quite in this theme before, which is, hey, here's a high risk legacy system. Legacy, 8 years is not that long, right? But it's been around for a little while. and you're coming into it. And of course, you've got opinions about AI, and so does everybody else on your team. And you've got potential use cases for AI. And then that kind of hits reality. And that's what I want to talk about today. So I guess just give us an overview. What are you working on? Where are you working? And what's the team and the application, the system like?
Yeah, so a staff software engineer, Caribou Financial, and we focus on refinancing auto loans. Our mission is to give people financial freedom. And believe it or not, there are people with car loans that are 30% interest. And so the goal of our company is to get people down to a more reasonable interest rate, save them money every month, get them the gap protections they might need so that if they have a car accident, heaven forbid, that they don't go into like financial distress because of it. And because we have real customers, we have to be very thoughtful about changes we make in the code. And that means we can't YOLO vibe code, just sit there just like in front of our computer being like, Claude, just make this thing for me, because we have real people who depend on our software. And so we are more cautious about it. And the way I like to think about anything in software is as a system. That's very much where my brain goes. And an engineering organization, along with the software it owns and gardens, is a system. Many inputs, many outputs, a lot of dependencies. And so where we're at right now is we're trying to scale our use of AI as a software development team from every engineer doing random things and experimenting to an actual system-wide use that has the ability to scale safely. And that is my fun project right now, is trying to figure out how do we scale AI development without destroying our code or reducing our quality.
Valentino, that's kind of the job description for you, isn't it? At Gusto?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
We have a very similar problem that we're trying to solve, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, where do you even start with something like that?
We start at the beginning.
Help Valentino, because he needs some direction.
All right. This is going to be fun then, because I need help too. So we're going to brainstorm and we're going to come up with some really good ideas. So I think when I started looking at this and reading all the blog articles, as we all do, doing all the research, what I first saw was that the code base has to be ready for AI to come in and build the context it needs. Everything in engineering is about context. If you don't understand all of the moving parts and all of the dependencies, you can have a problem. And if we have an 8-year-old monolith that at some point thought it should be microservices and then realized that was not the right idea, you also have some
Just want to cut in here and say every Ruby code base that is at least 8 years or older has this problem. All of them have had an identity crisis at one time. Go on.
I'm glad we're not unique, and no shade to microservices, a tool for the right problem. And our problem was not a microservice problem. But we do have a lot of spaghetti in our code and some things that are half done and some projects that got killed halfway done. And so for the AI bots, for our friend Claude specifically, to understand our code, it's going to go down the wrong path quite frequently, because they'll go find this class and they'll be like, oh, this is what I can use. Well, no, actually, that's dead. Doesn't work anymore. It's just never been removed. And so that's why I'm saying we have to kind of start at the beginning and prep the code base. So we found a couple very specific issues where we've had to really shore up our practices. So one is in metaprogramming. I think in Ruby, we love our metaprogramming. That makes the code a little bit tough to search. And I think Claude's favorite command is grep. And when you can't grep for a specific string, you really do have to be very careful. So that leads to the next safety mechanism, which is test harnesses. We need to make sure we have very robust testing so that if we do break something, that it will be caught in CI or caught before it goes into prod. I was going to say,
I'll mute that.
I think that's my train. My train has a much more aggressive honking sound. Yeah, so then we had to shore up our test harnesses quite a bit. And there were some areas where we had 20% code coverage on unit tests. There were some areas that we had integration level coverage, but not unit level. And then some vice versa. And as I started digging through that, I started finding dead code. So now we removed that. So you can see how building the system starts way at the beginning before we can even use Claude to really improve our code or add new features. And I could go on, there's more and more and more, but the big one that comes next after this is what kind of documentation do we have in the code base so that we can actually give our agents more information up front so that they have a better starting point for any questions we ask it or any features we wanted to put in.
I like that as a starting point. I have this example from this morning that I wanted you to react to. So this is Codex, but the results are pretty much the same with Claude Code. I love Codex now. Valentino, I'm ready to fight you over Claude Code versus Codex, but not at the moment. So I am working on a legacy code base and I'm just in this exploratory phase. I'm going to start making some changes. So I was just like, a very simple prompt. I just wanted to see what it would do. And I said, look, I always want Codex to be TDD and I want it to use best practices for design. It's a language that I don't work with all the time. It's not Ruby. I don't know how to really drill in. Always use Git work trees, PR would fit, etc. Anyway, so it gives me this boilerplate that had this bullet point in it and it said, prefer existing design patterns and best practices in the code base. Keep changes surgical and coherent with current architecture. And I immediately thought of you because I thought, I don't want it to use the patterns that are here. I don't know it that well, but I know it's not doing the right things. I want it to use best practices and refactor incrementally to those patterns. But I think by default, Codex at least is going to say, whatever's here is the way this person wants it. And so I'm going to kind of keep that structure.
Yes. And that is such a double-edged sword because on the one hand, yes, we don't want new patterns all over the place because it makes the code impossible to understand. But on the flip side, if you have bad patterns in place, having those replicated is not good. Our example of that situation was we were not using like the subject pattern and described class pattern in our RSpec files. And Claude was like, cool, I'll keep doing the same thing. And so we actually had to tell it, no, please use those patterns even though they don't exist and be really explicit about what patterns we wanted to change. And that's part of building that system around scaling AI is some of the patterns you want, some of the patterns you don't. And now you have to tell Claude which ones are the good ones.
Yeah, it's funny. Going against the Rails conventions really is just fighting everybody at this point. More than ever. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Setting up the right conventions, even on your own, that you do want is a hard challenge. And even Claude sometimes will listen to your Claude files.
Yeah, it's another thing I'm finding.
But there are ways I've found it to work better because it identifies the Claude files in subdirectories. So you can have like very specific directories have their own rules and memories, which is helpful. I'm curious, like you mentioned testing is like kind of critical. I would say don't even start using Claude unless you have testing in place and working well. But how do you like deal with the test growth? Do you have any rules in place for like, okay, no AI can make tests? You mentioned like best practices for like trying to get it to use the right subject predicate or things like that. How involved are you? Are you becoming test-driven development or?
It's such a big question. So I'm trying to think how to distill down the answer. We are still developing our rules and best practices around tests. Our test suite is slow already. And we have to make a decision. Do we want to let it get slower by adding more tests and then work on getting it faster? Like, what's our priority? Is it speed or is it coverage? And both are right. So we have to just choose which is most important right now. And so right now where we are focused is increasing the test coverage. So a specific example I have, in part of my experiments of developing our system for AI-driven development, I just started YOLOing some PRs. I didn't necessarily merge them YOLO, but I started YOLOing them. And I said, Claude, go refactor this code to use modern Rails practices and good OOP, things like that, and use test-driven development and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And I put up this PR and it actually looked really good. I was like, actually, this is fine. I think this is okay. And then one of my reviewers, my human reviewers, pointed out that there were some meta methods that Claude didn't notice, and that would now just throw a no method error because it hadn't fixed those. And I was like, that's interesting. So a human found this, but Claude didn't. But also our test harness did not find this. And so then I took a step back and I said, okay, Claude, we only have 60% test coverage over here. Please increase this, get all the branch coverage, et cetera, et cetera. And then I merged those two PRs and said, okay, now would it fail on this change? Nope, still didn't fail. I had to keep digging into it. And so I think right now my policy, or what I'm doing myself in my experiments, is do all the test coverage first in a separate PR before I even try to tackle the rest. So yes, more TDD, but confession, I would much rather have the AI write tests for me than sit there and do it myself.
Yeah, I got it. We want the honest truth there. I think most people are in that camp. All right. Most developers are in that camp. But then it does become this challenge, both at an individual level and at a team-wide level, which is, where is it that you insert the human judgment, the human behavior to get the highest leverage or return on your investment?
It's really hard. Yeah, you're asking me all the hard questions. So if I may take this one quite broad. So we've thought, okay, Claude and Gemini, they can do pretty decent PR reviews in the aspect of like conventions or no method errors, things like that, unsafe code. They're pretty good at that, but they don't really understand yet, especially these review bots, the full context and all the side effects and all of the unintended consequences of a change. And so we thought, okay, the human should come in on that aspect, the more complex of like the human can understand all these pieces that Claude can't see and apply that knowledge and that, historical context to this PR and make sure that the design is really good. The implementation of the intended feature design is really good. Where I got stuck is I said to myself, that's too late. Have you ever put up a PR that you like lovingly grew and you sent it through everything and then you put it up and then someone's like, you did this all wrong. This is in the wrong place. The design's wrong. You shouldn't have used a service object here. So to circle back to your actual question, pair programming. I'm seriously going back to everything we write should be paired, because then you get all of that design collaboration up front before at the best, most efficient time to have it, rather than at the end when the PR is ready to ship.
I love this. And actually, we talked a little bit about this with Kinsey, didn't we, Valentino? Where we were talking about letting an agent into your pair and how that might kind of positively impact the application and positively impact the efficiency. So have you done any of that, or has your team?
We're starting to do more of it, and we are quite early on in this system because it is like 30 things that we're trying to adjust at once. So we are working on that. And right now, our biggest bottleneck is PR review time. And I would assume at Gusto, you're kind of in the same boat. And we have gone from an average of 20 open PRs to 70 because we're putting up so many more PRs, but we still only have the same team size to review them. And that's where, I'm building the system further forward, is how do we fix the PR review problem? And, we haven't solved it, but everything I'm reading says that if you have good test harnesses and you have good canary environments, you don't necessarily have to read the code as much and as manually. So then you do want to have that pair programming because you don't want just one person kind of doing this in a silo. You want to have more eyes on it. But that's where we're stuck right now, is what do we do about PR review bottlenecks?
Let me tell you something. Every company that I know of has this problem. I was having a conversation about this just yesterday with one of my engineers on their client. And so it's rampant. And of course, this goes all the way up to Amazon, right? AWS, who had these outages a few weeks ago where they've applied something called controlled friction, which is just, slowing down and having more people look at the code. And so that's really not an answer, right? Like go slower is not an answer. So I don't think that this is solved, but I do know that it's a rampant problem. There are just PRs open everywhere. And of course, it's almost like you don't even want to tell the business that all this code is ready. It's like, well, just deploy it. What's the worst that could happen? Right? Like we know the worst that could happen because our jobs are on the line. But I think today it's a problem without an answer. I'm very interested to know what you think an answer might be or what it might look like. What are you thinking?
Yeah. It's a great place to start. So what I'm thinking right now, and this is not a novel idea, this is just from reading what other people are doing, what other people are finding success for, is where we're headed is toward very specific agents that review PRs. So the one agent would be an expert on active record, query efficiency, query performance, correct database access. Another agent PR reviewer might be the observability specialist. So it will look and say, hey, I don't see any way that we can actually see when your code is breaking or see if it's operating successfully. So I want you to add more observability here or tweak it for best practices, whatever. And then one joke was like, we need a Bekki bot, a Bekki agent PR reviewer, because Bekki will always call you out on instance variables in a partial. So you might as well just have a PR review agent that just looks for instance variables and partials. And the joke with that one is that it's not going to be mad at you. It's going to be disappointed.
Oh, no. It's so much worse.
That you put an instance variable in your partial. So things like that just do more than static analysis, but kind of look at the conventions, and you can tell Claude that it's on the Rails core team and it's an expert on Rails. And is this following all of the Rails conventions? Is this how you, core team member, would have written this PR? And try to get a little bit closer to at least not having to read like word by word for any little tiny issue in conventions or logical errors, things like that. So that's one thing we're looking at. And we've started building some of these. We already have RuboCop, and we're trying to bolster our RuboCop and get our to-do file from 3,000 lines to like maybe 100. I think once we get down to that point, we won't have to do as much style review, things like that. But yeah, what are you thinking?
I'm curious, because what this sounds like is like the hardest problem that anybody has is really how do you define meaning? Right? Under different contexts. Like you could just say, okay, be the best Ruby engineer and follow the best practices. That doesn't mean the same thing for every instance. You might follow different conventions in a test file that you might in a service object, that you might in a front-end component. The meaning of what it means to be a good Ruby programmer is different in each of those contexts, depending on what team you're on, what project you're on. And so I think about this a lot. How are you kind of like defining this meaning in a way that can improve future use cases? If you have like this specification bot, are you storing that information in a specific way, in a specific place, so that it can resurface when it visits a test file? What are your like approaches to like capturing that and saving it?
The more specific it is, I feel like the better it can be, right? Like, so if you have the Hotwire Turbo Stream expert bot, it has the meaning of what does good use of all of the Hotwire functionality look like. And so I wouldn't want that one looking at the services for Rails conventions. I'd want them to be very specific to different pieces of our code. And then what do? We pointed at the documentation, I guess, and then pointed at a bunch of like recent blog articles. I've definitely had Claude look at some Rails 6 conventions for our Rails 7 app and like apply the wrong fixes and the wrong review comments because we're on the wrong version of Rails compared to what it was looking at. So I think it has to be explicit and specific, but then also like concise. I think brevity is important because as soon as the context falls over, it starts doing wacky things. But every app has a different purpose in life. So I don't think all of us can use the same review agents. We're all solving slightly different problems, so we have different concerns. You know, if you're looking at a query on a 1,000,000-row database table, you might make a trade-off to have an n+1 query instead of pulling the entire table into memory, for instance. But you need to like know which issue you're dealing with or which is the most critical to your system. Yeah, what is the meaning of meaning?
That's all we need to figure out here, and then we can go home. I really like your answer, Bekki, and it sounds like the thing that caught my attention with creating review agents, for example, is that yes, you're right. Your review agents might not be my review agents on my application. And of course, I may work on 5 applications and I need different agents for all of them. But within your company, you might create a review agent And that might be the best thing for Caribou, no matter who the engineer is, right? Depending on the circumstance. Now you're in this position where you're trying to implement changes across a team, which means that you're going to have to deal with humans, unfortunately. And so I'm curious to know what other things have worked, and simultaneously with that, like what other misgivings or challenges have you had to overcome with the humans?
Yes, the humans are the center of everything we do, and they're a huge part of our system. So there's a couple things. So people have opinions. That's one lovely thing about humans. We all have opinions. And so we can do this big collaborative exercise of trying to gather all the information and everybody's perspectives, but then who makes the final decision? Because at some point we need to make a decision, and some people aren't going to agree with that decision. And so making sure that we're following change management practices, that people, even if they don't necessarily agree with the decision, they know why it was made and they understand and can be bought into it. It's not always a fast process, but I think it's really important in terms of building our engineering culture. And then there's also, we have to be respectful of people who are like, am I just writing Claude files that are going to take my job at some point? Like, I'm teaching Claude how to do my job, and that has a fear component with it as well. The training I'm finding is also hard because we are remote. So we're not at the same water cooler. And so we can't find out what people are doing or what processes and policies have been put in place by accident. We have to be very intentional about it. And if you've heard the adage, people have to hear something 7 times before they actually internalize it. Now picture you're the leader in the organization saying, use this Claude plugin before pushing your PR. You start to feel like a broken record because you have to say it 7 times to make sure everybody's actually seen it at least once, has seen the directive or seen the policy change. And so we are definitely struggling with how do we promote the changes that we're making, the improvements we're making, and then how do we get people to use all of the tools that we're putting in place?
Yeah, well, first, let me say that adage that you have to say something 7 times before people hear it once, it's as annoying as it is true. In 12 years of running a company, I've found it to be true over and over and over again. And so you just kind of get used to it. I'm just kind of like, well, I know I'm saying this for the 5th time, but it hasn't stuck yet. So I'm just going to keep saying it. More importantly, you've talked about this water cooler effect. I think that's really interesting, or the lack thereof, because you're remote. And I could have 4 different conversations with 4 different engineers at Def Method, and they're going to tell me 4 different ways that they use AI, even if they're on the same team, even if they're working on a similar application. And so I get that can be a real challenge. Are there ways that you can help your team to kind of keep up with the latest, or even be intrigued or excited by developments? Because the thing is, even if you implement something, it's going to have to change in a couple of weeks, right? Things change so quickly.
We've been trying a few things here, and it's tough because we are also across the country. So we have 4 time zones. And so, lunch for one time zone is dinner for the other. So it is always hard to get us all in one room. But we have Friday Technopalooza is what we call it, where we just share random things we've been working on that are involved with the engineering organization. So sometimes it's product changes, sometimes it's a new tech-related thing that we've discovered or worked on. And lately it's been turning a lot into sharing AI practices and knowledge and AI-based experiments that we've been doing. We also have a Slack channel called Knowledge Share, where it's like, oh, I found this random trick that's really making my life better. I'm going to go share it in this channel. And while that is kind of just a scrolling feed of stuff, at least if you see it and a month later it becomes relevant to you, you can actually go search for it. So at least it's there. The hardest part when people say, oh, we just need to document everything, I don't buy that, because that's only half of it. The other half is people have to read it. And I think 90% of documentation that exists on a system is not read by anybody. Nobody even knows to go look for it. And that, to me, when people say just go document it or go write up a policy or a procedure, I don't buy it, because writing it doesn't actually help if no one knows to go read it. So you still have to keep doing the knowledge share piece of it. So just creating spaces where people can talk and can share ideas has been really important. Another incidental one that I found is we have a deployment call that we don't do continuous releases. We do scheduled releases. And when those happen, there's a call and only 1 or 2 people have to be on that call. But on that call, we're just doing a lot of watching pods roll and watching builds go through. And so it turns into a really great water cooler. So even if I'm not assigned to be on that release, I go to that meeting because it ends up being a really nice spot to share information with teammates and also get to know our remote coworkers. And usually we do end up talking about what our latest experiment is, or I've been trying to add tests to this class and holy cow, it is crazy. And then someone else will be like, oh, I worked on that. So I know that the reason it's crazy is this other thing over here. And you really do get a lot more organic knowledge sharing just these shared spaces.
You mentioned a really great point of how do you bring human back into these new workflows that we're creating for ourselves? And that's a great one, having these release water coolers. That's fun. I'm curious, where else can we bring human back? And I know like one thing that has worked well recently is before working on a feature, kind of doing like a mob pairing session where we have like 5 to 10 people, working on the design or like whatever new thing that is going to be worked on as like a collective experience where one person's driving like the agent session and being like, oh no, that's not exactly what we want. Right. And like, well, why don't we want that? Teasing apart, like kind of like doing the old school, like on a whiteboard almost, but in an agent session on a Zoom or something, right?
Totally.
Of breaking apart the problem you're really trying to solve. What other ways are you like thinking about this kind of problem, like forcing the what problem are we solving and how are we going to solve it together kind of thing?
So this is going to sound, I guess, counterintuitive, but we had some issues this week with some of our pods falling over, just running out of CPU, and getting 7 of us on the call troubleshooting it, even though it was high pressure, high stress, and like nobody wants to be in the situation where we have an outage. It was one of my most fun days at work in the last month because, we were all just together hammering on this problem. And the funniest thing is we're all asking Claude independently, what's wrong, what's causing this? And Claude gave us each of us a different answer. So we had 5 different smoking guns from Claude, and not one of them was the root cause.
That is kind of shocking. Maybe it shouldn't be shocking. That is shocking to me.
And Claude was pointing at this particular Sidekick job that we had refactored a Sidekick job to pull more stuff into memory rather than doing more database queries. And Claude was like, this is the smoking gun. This is definitely what caused your issue. High risk, high impact. It had siren emojis in its report. It was very, very adamant that this was the issue. And then after we researched it for like 20 minutes, we're like, that job wasn't even scheduled to run. What are you talking about? It was like, oh, well, I guess I didn't really know if it would run or not. So, we had this lovely mob troubleshooting session. We all got to laugh about it. We all got to be very human, even while we were using our assistants to help us troubleshoot the problem.
That makes me think this is like almost like a missing product, is like a way to get collectively everybody's bots to join in on a single session where there's like a mediator trying to solve a problem, incident response, but like for your human and their bot to join.
So now on the next incident call, only everybody's AI agents will join and no actual humans will join, and they'll just...
I'll have ruined the whole thing for you.
So much for bringing humanity back.
No, when I do think about this like Moltbook experiment, maybe as a way to like sidetrack people into humanity is by getting their AIs distracted, in like in a Moltbook fashion where their bots are socializing and like giving the human space.
But there was a dating app that came out on the back of that. The agents get together and they kind of work out whether or not the humans would make a good match. I like that.
Lovely. We're fairly cautious in how we deploy our agent tooling because we deal with a lot of sensitive data. And so we have a very high security bar. And so we aren't doing things like Moltbook and OpenCloud where we can just YOLO go out anywhere and do stuff. We're much more cautious with what permissions we give it. And when I hear some of the stories of people using OpenClaw, I am shocked that they're doing this with their company's code and their company's infrastructure. And I wonder how long it is before things start going very badly.
Well, bad is in the eye of the beholder. If you work at a company where your primary purpose is to fix these kinds of things, yeah, it's probably going just fine.
So you're happy.
I'm doing fine, yeah.
Great. Keep doing that.
Now, I also use OpenClaw, and I also vibe code and YOLO, but I only do it on things where I'm the only user. And when I'm using OpenClaw, it's in a sandbox on a DigitalOcean droplet where, the blast radius is very small. Does it surprise me that people are not doing that? Not really. I mean, engineers, I think included, there are just a subset of engineers that just have a very high risk tolerance or a very low amount of caring for things that go wrong in their company. Either way.
Yeah. Your software has no bugs if you have no users.
That's absolutely true.
Therefore, users cause bugs.
Users cause bugs. And if I'm the only idiot that's annoyed by this stupid thing I did with Codex and YOLO mode, well, it's like a tree falling in the woods.
In all fairness, as developers, we cause bugs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's fair.
The code wouldn't exist without us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a valid point there, because what everybody is reporting, including here today, is that because of AI code gen tools, we have more PRs than we can possibly handle, which means more code almost exclusively. Right? PRs almost always add more code than they delete. And that means that we have this throughput issue where the answer seems to be for a lot of people, well, hey, we've got to open this up. We've got to get this stuff moving because the bottleneck is now the human or not human review stage. But what that's going to get you, if you solve that problem, is a lot more code. And code is a liability. So what do we do about that?
If I had the answer to that, I could probably retire. This is the question.
I've got a solution.
All right.
I call it the Avdibot, and it's following the no code presentation he gave a long time ago. And it just starts deleting code. Do you really need this? And can it be a Google Sheet?
Right.
Going through code one by one and being like, what is this really doing? Right. And be like, yeah, we don't need this. Let me just delete this. The test pass, right? Like almost like the chaos monkey from Netflix, but like for your code and just like pruning it and be like, yeah, there's a reason you don't have a test to cover this. It's probably because you don't need it. And then just remove it.
Yeah. Like a lot of the tech podcasts I listen to, they talk about how people aren't going to buy SaaS software anymore because they're just going to vibe code up their own software to do whatever they need to do. And I am with you, Valentino, that I think more software is not good. Less software is good. And I actually see that kind of falling over a cliff at some point where people are like, I don't want to maintain this Trello board. I'll go pay the $20 a month, whatever, because maintaining this Trello board YOLO app is more expensive on my time than just paying the $20 a month. I mean, we only have so much energy and focus, and I don't think most business owners want to maintain 20 pieces of software themselves.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's the thing, is people keep considering this stuff in isolation. Okay, I'm going to rip out my instance of Salesforce, right? That was a famous example, and I'm going to build it myself. Okay, great. Well, now you've got a CRM to maintain. If you actually do that, which I think is insane, are you then also going to rip out another app and another one? Do I really want to maintain everything that I depend on today with a bunch of applications that are all being vibe coded and vibe managed or maintained? Absolutely not. So what I think is more likely is that the threat that I can, maybe if I'm an enterprise or I'm a large company, hey, I can just go and build this myself. So you better give me a discount, or you better give me this. That's not an original thought. That was something that was brought up in the Citrini research paper that sent Wall Street scrambling for a couple of days. And I don't agree with all of it, but I think that's a smart thing. Like if it's giving you negotiating power, then maybe the business model needs to shift a little bit. And maybe you need to be a little bit more thoughtful about what differentiates you as a company other than just the software. But I don't think that's strikingly different. I think that's just enhancing what has already been true.
Yeah, it reminds me of Basecamp's whole phenomena on the software industry in general, in that they had one great product that they just focused on exclusively and just iteratively worked on just delivering the quality product of that very specific thing. And they started getting rid of stuff, right? Like they had Campfire as a chat service. And they're like, you know what? We don't want to deal with that. We're not going to develop that. Yeah, right. Nobody else does. Now they've like revisited for some reason. They're not like offering it as a service, right? Like you're not paying them money for it, right? There's like a proliferation of that idea. Okay, like we have a very specific thing. It's giving us customers and we're happy with the customers we have, right? We don't need this exponential growth month over month in order to sustain that state of being, right? I thought that's the future, right? Like people are going to really dig in, and they did for a bit. And then they're like, well, I want more money. And everybody thought, you know, if I just add on all these other features, like we'll attract more customers, right? And then you get those customers and they're like, why doesn't this thing work in the corner of the app that I want to use it for? And you're like, well, we'll get there. And I feel like this is the same effect that we're seeing with more growth, right? And more like adoption. So like, yeah, sure, like you can vibe code your thing and it'll serve a very specific purpose to start. And then people will be like, oh, what I really want to do is be able to call this thing from my phone and just have it talk to me, right? And then they're like, oh yeah, how hard could that be, right? And somebody builds that and then it like has bugs and issues and like, well, you know, I can't really deal with that right now, but just stop using that for a little bit, right? Like that's like what ends up happening. And like you get these people that get adopted and they start to get excited and then it like falls apart on them and they get less excited and more frustrated. And then they're just like, all right, I'm just going to pay somebody else.
I'm just going to pay somebody. Yeah. Yeah. And like, so like WordPress has been around for 40 years at this point. And I see so many small business owners that they got WordPress because it's like, you don't need a developer, you don't need to code anything. And 40 years later, the people who are using WordPress, they still don't know how to manage plugin updates without their whole site going down. And so when I think about people who are still struggling to do the minor IT work of their low-code systems, I just don't envision those same business owners being excited about maintaining their AI agent software over time. Or like, oh, I got this notice that my key was compromised. What do I do? And that happens a few times and you're like, this isn't worth it anymore. Even though it saved me $20 a month, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I hear you there. So I want to step back a bit and I want you to think about the AI engineering of the future. And when I say the future, I guess I mean like 2 years. That's enough time for things to be wildly different than they are today. So, I mean, what feels real to you and your team and what you can reasonably envision doing and what feels like it's kind of just hype and will fall by the wayside?
The first thing that comes to mind as being more achievable with AI is staying on top of tech debt. The biggest issue when you have a business is that you're trying to write software for the business that improves the business, brings the business forward. And so the things that get deferred are the maintenance aspects and like upgrading Rails or switching from single quotes to double quotes in the whole code base, like those kinds of things. And so I definitely see AI being an unlock in being able to maintain modern standards in software in a more ongoing, organic way. I think that's going to be huge. And we're already using it to really accelerate our tech debt management today. So I could see in like 2 years that just being a thing that happens every night automatically without us even having to be involved. The thing that I am still not sure is going to be ready is, I guess some people call it taste. I could tell the software I want a Trello board, or I can tell the agent, that I want a vibe coded Trello board, but I can't necessarily explain correctly or in the right way of like how I want it to flow or feel when I use it. Again, those very human aspects of our software. Like in the end, most of our software is written for human use. Some of it is talking to other software, and maybe we'll get further there. But at the end of the day, there are people using it, and if it doesn't feel good to them, And I just don't know how we would explain that to an AI agent.
I think that's insightful. Somewhere between there's no accounting for taste and just building off of what was already done is kind of easy. It was always kind of easy. Now it's easy and fast. But that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to craft what the next thing is that people want to use and see and feel and touch. Do I have that roughly correct?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. So almost like we're all going to become product managers where we have to be able to describe the purpose of the system in a way that the AI agents can understand.
So we'll all become product managers. And what else? What else happens after that?
Maybe the apocalypse? I don't know. It's an exciting time because I'm not sure anybody really knows where we're headed right now.
Yeah, you're right about that. But we love getting people's sort of read on the future because a lot of people see things differently and we just don't know. But it's certainly an exciting time we're living in today. Valentino, you have any parting questions?
So have you tried Codex? And do you prefer...
Yeah, he's coming back to it.
Oh man, you're putting me on the spot. Okay. So I love RubyMine. So there aren't a lot of other of the IDEs that I picked up because RubyMine is my favorite, but I love Claude Code's CLI interface. I'm very fond of it. So no, I have not picked up Codex. I haven't even picked up, what is it called? Claude Coworker or?
Claude Cowork. Yeah, it's like a vanilla Claude bot.
Yeah. And then Google's anti-gravity is actually quite good. Yeah, anti-gravity is pretty good. But so I'm going to totally cop out on this and I'm going to say they're both great. I love them equally. Sorry, guys.
No way that's true. All right.
I'll take that as a win for me.
I'm just going to tell you right now that you're both incorrect on this. I don't know that's true. What I know is that on the small apps that I'm using, Codex is flying past Claude Code. And Claude Code now, like I have superpowers, enabled and all that. And now I'm just like, and maybe you don't use this anymore, but now when superpowers starts planning, I'm like, oh my God, just kill me. It's going to take forever. I had it working on some like very simple kind of just adding, linting and, some kind of boilerplate kind of stuff to an app yesterday. And God, it's like, it's asking me these clarifying questions and then it's creating this plan and writing the plan. And meanwhile, Codex is on another branch, just like flying through issues, flying through.
Really?
Now, it's smaller code base, not huge like Gusto and not whatever the gap is between us and Caribou, but still, I mean, worth a shot, worth taking a look at.
Okay. I will go assign someone to do that.
You'll assign somebody to do that. Assign an agent to test out that agent and have it report back to you.
But then I need another agent to summarize the report.
I know.
I
know. And then another one to decide. Well, Bekki, it's been great having you on the show. Would love to have you on again. Would love to talk about the conference, for example, maybe right before or right after you have it. I wish you all the best of luck in planning and organizing. And
thank you.
Yeah. And hope to see you around soon.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing you both at Rocky Mountain Ruby because I know you're going to be the first ones to buy tickets.
Well, I'm not even going to need to buy a ticket because I'm going to get this request. Instead, I'm going to submit a request like I did not do a couple of weeks ago. And Valentino, will I see you this evening at Artificial Ruby?
Unfortunately not. I got some contractors at home. I got to get back to.
Contract killers. All right. I'll be there on my own, telling people to stop using Claude Code. Just kidding. All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you again soon.